In this episode, I talked to Sam Goodman, the hop nerd, about human and organizational performance. We kind of get into a lot of different things, but we pretty much stayed on the road with H&OP 101, and I hope to talk to Sam again soon, get into a little bit deeper into H&OP. So without further ado, let's get into my interview with Sam Goodman. Before we get into today's topic, I want to remind everybody, if your business is reopening after any kind of closure due to COVID, or you've continued to remain open, but you're struggling with how to mark your facilities to ensure physical distancing and relay important information about safety and health as it relates to COVID, I want you to go visit our friends over at Mighty Line Floor Tape. Mighty Line has some great products for you to mark your floors, whether it be the stand here, the 6 feet distancing, or just floor tape to denote lanes of travel. They have everything you need to mark your facility. So hit the link in the show notes, visit our friends at Mighty Line Floor Tape. They are incredible partners in safety. I can't thank them enough for their support of the podcast. Again, Mighty Line Tape for all of your floor marking needs. All right, we're here with Sam Goodman, also known as the Hop Nerd. And the only reason why I call you that is because I've seen that online. Now, I don't know if you wrote it or if somebody else wrote it. And if somebody else wrote it, I apologize. But are you the Hop Nerd?
I'm the Hop Nerd, man. Yeah, it was a name that was given to me. I didn't make it up. I just ran with it.
Yeah, there you go. So, Sam, give us an intro. Who is Sam? What is Sam all about? And tell us about your deepest inner thoughts.
Oh, that's a tough one, man. Who is Sam? Oh, that's like, dang, man. I'm going to get all philosophical here. I don't know. No, so I can start with kind of the Hop Nerd thing, and because that's kind of where I'm at kind of more recently. I am known as the Hop Nerd. I'll tell that story. That's probably the best place to start is, I was working into the space of human and organizational performance, and it was early on in kind of my personal journey in human and organizational performance. And if you can't tell, I'm kind of passionate about this stuff. And if you haven't seen me around on LinkedIn or YouTube or other places or the podcast, you'll figure that out about me. I'm super passionate about human organizational performance. Doing safety better is probably the best way to do that. It's just making things better. And so I was giving this presentation. I get into it, man. I'm like flinging my arms around and pacing around the room. And you know how we get, us safety nerds and hop nerds, and we get deep into it. And afterwards, this guy walked up. He's like, "Man, you're such a hop nerd. You're really into this stuff." And then it just kind of went from there. It kind of exploded. And that kind of what led to some of more of my background led into me doing a podcast around human and organizational performance and kind of all the concepts of that and safety differently and kind of all that other stuff. To kind of go back into my history, I grew up in traditional safety. I grew up in old school company, old school safety, heavy command and control, heavy kind of that thing. Like if you close your eyes and really imagine like maybe the worst bits of kind of that approach, that's really where I kind of cut my teeth as a safety practitioner. And I've been doing that for a good chunk of time, probably going on, 5, 6, 7 years in more of the traditional space before I found myself kind of into, I would say maybe the cliff. It was kind of the cliff. I was getting really frustrated with maybe more traditional approaches to safety and just kind of doing that safety insanity thing where it's like, okay, that didn't work. Let's try harder and see what happens. And then on that kind of wheel of trying it harder and seeing what happens, it was always letting me down. And I started to kind of have these thoughts of like, well, maybe we're not doing this the best possible way that we could. First, I thought I was insane. You talk to anybody that kind of finds their way into the kind of human organizational performance space, especially more organically. They usually start with, I'm insane. No one else thinks this way. And I'm going to get fired because this is crazy. This is crazy. Oh, accidents I don't think they're all preventable. I don't know. I don't know that the scrape on the knuckle is going to kill somebody. I don't know. Right. I'm insane. I'm going to get fired. And then one of my coworkers, when I was about to leave, I was done. I was ready to leave the profession. I was ready to run.
I was going to ask you if, like the rest of us, you ever questioned your decision to go into safety because
Absolutely.
Of the old 3 E's of safety, right? Educate, engineer, educate, and enforce.
Right.
And that was
Right.
it.
Well, it was, yeah. I found the cliff. I call it the cliff.
Yeah.
Because I found my way to this point where I was done with that. I was really frustrated with the approaches, and I didn't believe in them anymore. When you're young in the profession, and I started in safety at a very young age. I think I was 20 when I first kind of found my way into a safety tech kind of safety observer kind of role. I was very fortunate enough to kind of find my way towards that and have some pretty good mentors that kind of pulled me in that direction of like, I'll give you a shot if you do this, this, and this, and this. You're going to get some education. You're going to do this, and then I might make you a safety tech on a job that I have coming up under the most seasoned person that I can put you with. Um, but so I found my way into it kind of young, and even then, right, because a lot of that kind of stuff doesn't sit well with a lot of us at some point, right? And I'm going, I don't know, this seems kind of, but you're young, you're new, or you're new to the profession, and you're going, who am I to like say that sounds kind of dumb? Like who? Like I'm green. I'm not. So I was fully indoctrinated into kind of that more traditional sense, and I saw the frustration that not just I was feeling, but other safety practitioners were going through, going, I don't like the way we treat people. And so that's what led me to that cliff kind of originally. And I was there. I was done, ready to jump. I'm not making this up when I say I had a box packed
Wow.
under my desk, ready to go. I was at the time I was at a very large power generating facility, and I was sharing kind of a space. You know how it goes. You're going to have like the safety office and to cram like a bunch of people into a little tiny space, sardines. And so you get to know the folks that you work with really, really intimately, living in such a small space usually. Um, and one of my friends that came really close with knew that I was kind of on the edge. And I come in one day and there was this book laying on my seat, and it was Safety Differently by Sidney Decker.
Sydney. Yeah.
And then from there, that's ultimately what, and this, I share this in some stuff that I've written, but and even in some conversations I've had with Sydney, I tell him that like that's the book that drew me into this. And the first thing he says is like, "Why the hell would you read that book?" It's like it's really dense. That's probably not the starting position you should go for with this kind of journey. But the byproduct of that was it kept me in the profession. Like it made me realize that I wasn't really insane. Like there was a lot of work that had been done around this.
Yeah.
It wasn't just me having these wacky thoughts that well, I'm sure we'll dive into. Um, but it kept me. It kept me, and it really took me down this path. Like, okay, I want to stay in this profession to really get back to what it's truly about, which is making things better, making people's lives a little bit better. Making work not suck so much. That's what drew me to it originally. Right. So yeah, I found that cliff. I've got right on the edge, and it was some of it was those more traditional approaches that I was frustrated with. Some of it was just some of the BS that exists within our profession and within the organizations that our profession serves a lot of times. Right. I was getting really tired of being like the punching bag when bad things happened. Getting real tired of kind of getting the go do of like go fix the world. Some of just the misunderstandings that happen in some of that. And no, I was right there, and I chose to not jump, which I'm really glad that I didn't, because it left me in a good way, mad. It left me in a good way to wanting to go forward and make things better, not only for me, like, yeah, like a little self-serving here. Like I wanted to make safety not suck for me because I wanted to have a nice long career in it, but then also for the folks that have been doing this for a really long time and fighting the same battle. And for the folks that are just now starting to scratch the surface of getting into our profession, it's a great job. It shouldn't suck. God knows, we need more great safety people out there. Don't let anything that I just said scare you away. Please come. We need safety people.
Yeah. And you're saying some similar things that I went through, except I was exposed to sort of a systems approach early on, and I started in the
Yeah.
fire service, and I went through a program. It's one of these goofy things hanging behind me, but Suburban Officers of Training program. They don't have it anymore, unfortunately, but they taught not so much behavioral stuff. They taught us, like when we would go through fatalities, firefighter fatalities, they never once said, this is what this person did wrong.
Right.
They always put it in context of, this is operationally this is how it could have gone differently.
Right.
Like operationally, like your process, your whole approach, from training to the right sizing equipment for the scene. And like, it was all of that stuff. And so it was driven into my head, and mostly, I had a captain who was former military. There are no bad soldiers, only bad leaders, and
Right.
and so then when I got out, I looked at a program down at Sinclair College when I first started getting into the private sector. It was Safety Risk Management 101, SRM 101. And again, a great instructor, Brenda. And she would go through the book. It was an old book. And it was this old school stuff. And they even spelled out the 3 E's, and they had chapters for each of the 3 E's of safety. And that was it. And she would say, hey, this is the curriculum. So we're going to go through this. And then she would say, but here is how most organizations are looking or starting to look at. And so that was my first introduction to, like, you're going to be hit with this way, but this is the way you should probably steer the organization. And then that was the cliff I was faced with, was that running up against a brick wall before I actually found the cliff. But when I went into consulting, it was because I had seen some success in some small areas, and it was an opportunity like you. I don't like losing. I'm very competitive, but it was exciting. I was like, this isn't that difficult. And I had a mentor tell me, you just have to ask a simple question when it comes to safety. And that is, what's the job that needs to be done?
Yeah.
What job does that operator have to do? What's the goal of that operator? What do they have to do? Now, how can we enable that operator to do that job? What obstacles do we have to remove? How do we simplify the process? How many steps does it take? Can we eliminate some steps? And then it gets into this lean thing. And so, and that just opened up my whole world. So that's why I wanted to talk to you, because I know you're just totally, you're very animated and you're very passionate about this stuff, which I love.
I'm wild. But no, that's such an interesting story. I spent a good chunk of my time before I found myself, just to go, I guess, a little deeper in my background, stuff that I kind of avoid. But so I spent about 4 or 5 years in and around the fire service. Prior to that, I went to school of all things for criminal justice.
Oh, wow.
So criminology, kind of those things. My kind of rule when I went to college was like, it can't be boring. That was the only rule I had. I'm like, I'm not going to say anything boring. That's just no. I hate school. So it can't be boring. It has to draw my attention. It has to pull me in, or I'm going to flunk. So this was a tactical decision. It's like, if it's not good, it's going to end up bad. I'm just going to waste a lot of money. But through that, I found my way into, of all things, into the fire service. So it really echoes well, kind of with me, kind of your journey as well. But yeah, you find that for me, at least, I found that organizations that I found myself working for, they were really, really deeply ingrained in those kind of traditional approaches. I was like, I'm going to train you how to do something, train you, right? I'm going to make sure that you're trained. I'm going to write a bunch of rules, or I'm going to probably start with the rules, write the rules, train you on those rules, expect you to follow those rules. And if anything bad happens, it's because you didn't follow those rules hard enough, or there was some lack on your part. There was some lack of awareness. There was this belief that, I don't know, probably the easiest way to put it is that the organization believed that through exercising enough of that kind of pain and suffering force, I think at some point, that you would eventually beat people into compliance, and that through that compliance, nothing bad could potentially happen. And we know that that's not true. And many organizations now are beginning to understand, like, well, that's 100% compliance, where nothing actually happens. Work doesn't happen,
Right.
much less. And if there is 100% compliance, bad things can still happen because the world is crazy, and kind of all these different bits of that. But I think a part that was frustrating for me as well is that I was kind of in that space of, like, right when a lot of these companies were really pouring behavior-based safety kind of down. And let me pause here and say, a bastardized version, right?
Yes.
Of kind of behavior-based safety on top of that, kind of down their organizations, where it was really weaponized, right? That's like, well, if you just do enough observations and you correct enough unsafe behaviors, then
I'll coach you into submission.
it's the same model, right?
Yes.
It's based on the same beliefs. They were just
I
taking the same
believe,
assumptions, right?
Sam, I
Calling them
believe
something else.
behavior-based safety suffered from bad PR,
100%.
bad marketing. It was a terrible name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what's the one word everyone focused on? Behavior.
Fix the behavior.
It wasn't the antecedents that influenced behavior, the systems or lack thereof, and it wasn't consequences. Positive reinforcement, inadvertently calling somebody out for doubling the rate of everybody else, even though they cut every corner to do it. They didn't focus on any of those systems things. They said behavior, awesome, and this is easy. And it's
easy peasy lemon squeezy, all done. Fix safety, right? Yeah. And so I think what really opened my eyes to that is I spent I did a podcast probably years back now, a couple of years, at least a year and a half or so back with Dr. Tim Ludwig. And I went into this, and I'm Dr. Tim, if you're listening, I don't mean this in a bad way, but I kind of went into this with like not kind of a little fearful, like I wonder how this is going to go. Like it's Tim come up under Scott Geller and kind of in that kind of behavior-based safety kind of group. But then the more that I started to like talk to Tim, and the more that I started to dig, I'm like, these guys are saying a lot of the same stuff that we're saying. Like the non-bastardized version. It was a wonderful conversation. I learned so much from spending time with him, and really starting to understand this.
How did it get that? How do you think it got bastardized? Where
I think it's
like, did non-safety people take it and go, thanks, we got this, and then picked it apart?
It's the same fear, and I've heard this fear echoed from several others in and around HOP right now, is that we take it and we see it as the easy button, and we take it forward, and we don't admit what it truly is, that it's complicated and it's complex, and it's not a program. It's not something that we can just throw on paper, and now it's this super easy step 1, 2, 3 ABC, safety's fixed kind of thing. That's one thing that I know personally I'm very, very, very conscious of when I'm spending time talking about HOP, especially with organizations that are in the process of trying to implement HOP or go down this path of doing safety a little differently. And I'm saying HOP safety differently. I just recorded a podcast earlier a while back, and today I was telling you before we started that today has been a wild day, where I basically said I tried to remember all these different names, because someone will ultimately get offended that I didn't say safety 2, or that I did. I didn't say.
Oh, I don't get hung up on the labels.
But that's my fear, is that we're going to view it as this kind of idea or this thing as just another program to manage, just another easy button. And I think it was that. I think it was more that as people, let's take it back to the people part, back to acknowledging. This is some of where we're getting at right around human organizational performance. We're acknowledging our humanity, right? We're accepting it at face value as for what it is, right? That, look, I'm not going to be the person that cures us of humanity. Your company's not going to be the person that cures people of all the things that make them human, nor do you want to be, because it's all that makes us human. But some of that stuff, there's some bits in there, right? We like easy. We really like easy. Like, we like easy so much. That's the reason why, if you go turn on your TV, if you go anywhere on YouTube, if you go anywhere on the internet, you're going to find somebody selling you easy cures to all your problems, because that's the classic marketing 101. Here's an easy thing to something that causes you pain in your life. Weight loss is a great example. Take this pill, everything will be fine. You don't have to change anything. It's super easy. Take this, you can sleep better. Take this, you can wake up faster, and on and on and on and on and on. And so I think it's probably a byproduct of that, right? Is that manifests itself into our workplaces. We want easy, we want quick, we want fast, easy solutions to the things that plague us, the things that cause us pain. And obviously, safety is one of those things in our work worlds, right? In the physical sense, that safety, in and around safety, seriously, not good things can happen, right? We can have people significantly hurt or worse. Right. So you have physical pain and suffering that we're trying to counter. And then you have the organizational headache of like, how do I deal with this? This stuff is super hard. And so I think it is bastardized through that, kind of reducing it to something that is truly not, in hopes of making it easier, in hopes of making us not have to suffer through the change or whatever. You kind of get where I'm going at this.
Oh yeah.
Because I'm going to keep rambling about our desire to make things easy.
No, this is all good stuff, because we've all felt it. And even for the younger, and I don't want to, offend, I don't mean this in an offensive way, but younger in their career, not so much age. I mean, you're talking about human and organizational performance. I learned about this in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
I mean,
not
it's
new.
been
The new
around.
view is not new, right?
Yeah, it's not new. And that's why I hate this whole rebranding and like, oh, hey, did you read about this new book? And I read it and I go, oh, you mean stuff I learned in 1994?
Yeah.
And
Oh, you mean Eric Hollenagel stuff that's been around forever that somebody finally
right.
put in a new book?
Yeah. So let's talk. I mean, we could do a whole episode on I think why everyone likes shortcut. Path of least resistance is what I call it. But let's talk about, because we've alluded to it, human and organizational performance, or H&OP, or HOP now.
Yeah.
Let's talk about like high level HOP 101. What is human and organizational performance? That approach. What is that?
So for me, what I really hone in on, and you can go and you can Google that and really dig into some really deep and meaningful definitions. And there's entire papers that are written on what constitutes human and organizational performance, or any of these other bits of this approach. But for me, the thing that I really like to kind of draw people towards is that it's the shift away from viewing people as a problem to control, and is moving towards viewing those people as a solution. And they're problem solvers, right? And in our more traditional ways, we viewed people as the problem, right? As the problem to control, the problem to manage, that people and their behaviors, that we have to have systems in place to control them constantly, ultimately because we don't trust them. I think that's a really interesting piece to highlight. So that's some of that shift to kind of go back towards the other side of that. For me personally, it's a move towards trusting the folks that actually get stuff done, right? Starting from a neutral position of trust as an organization rather than from a position of distrust. Trusting in those people and their expertise and leaning into that to gain learning about how stuff actually happens, right? Because that's kind of the thing, right? In those more traditional kind of approaches, we've really thought that we knew how work was supposed to happen. We really had this clear picture of what some will describe as kind of the black line, right? I won't even dive into that. But what we've kind of viewed as this is the most best way that work can take place. And the closer that we can keep people to this line of compliance, the better. I think the shift over more towards human and organizational performance and embracing people and trusting people and viewing them as holding all the answers that we really need to know about that they do, allows us to dig deeper into learning about normal work. Like, folks are going to teach us because it's the stuff that they do. Like, we think we know how they should do it. They actually do it every single day. They work through and they adapt and they create safety in motion, right? As they're working through their work in their work worlds. And they oftentimes have great outcomes. Now, in a more traditional sense, we've looked at that and said, well, that's because we have such great rules. And that's because we have such great process, and they must be following that process. And that's why that's happening. More into kind of where we're going with this understanding that we don't really know, but we need to learn. As you start to dig into that, and we start from that position of trust, and we start to understand that the people that do the work have the answers about the work. They know best how the work should be done. We start to learn that we didn't have a clue really as to how work was actually happening, and we're adapting through, and we're making do, and we're figuring stuff out. So where I'm going with all this is digging into that thing and embracing learning from the stuff from the people that GSD, or the people that get stuff done. To me, that's really, really what it's about. It's viewing them as the problem solver rather than the problem. And there's a whole world of stuff that goes on underneath that statement that we could talk HOP principles and kind of all these kind of other things. It's probably not really even that important to dig into when we're talking high level HOP stuff. But that's it. That would be the elevator pitch for me. If I had to give you one sentence, what human and organizational performance is, it's viewing people as a problem solver rather than the problem to be solved.
Yeah, I love that. I worked with an engineer many, many years ago, and she told me, she said, the problem with traditional engineers is they think up, they design something, which is fantastic, but then they pass it off and they don't actually follow through with how it has to get built, right? Or manufactured or assembled or whatever. And so many years later, when I ended up at in the aviation industry, they actually required engineers had to be part of that team for every new design launch. They had to actually, I'm talking, when I say be involved on the team, I mean, the engineer was out on the floor in the weld booth, working with the welder fabricate this part. And that's when they figured out, holy smokes, like we have to create a fixture that stands this thing up, or you got to get underneath and you know what, I can change this, that, and the other and eliminate that. Like, there's one thing, like you said, work as I imagine it. And then there's another thing to actually try to do it. And I was always frustrated in construction when I said, if architects had to come out here and actually build what they design, every building would look like a box. Because some of the biggest challenges and biggest hazards in construction are usually due, like a parapet wall on the top of a building that's 2.5 feet tall. I'm like, really? You couldn't have just made it a little taller?
Just a touch.
So we didn't need fall protection. And it's, and the maintainers getting up there once the building's occupied now you take your building and make it ugly because you didn't know that this work had to actually get done up there and maintain it. And now you've got this a parapet wall when you could have made the same look carry throughout. I mean, just that right there opened my eyes. If you have to get close to the work, and that's a fundamental lean principle, is go to where the work, Gemba, I think, right, is go to where the work happens and learn it and see how it works. So I love that. I love that.
Yeah. I think there's such a powerful thing in that, right? This idea of, like you said, getting close to the work and understanding that you're never going to be close enough. Right. And what I mean by that is that there's so many folks, especially in like leadership, and you deal with organizations just as I do. There's a lot of folks that work their way through an organization, start somewhere here on the sharper end, move closer to the blunt end, right? They usually move up because they were really good at what they did. They still assume, right? They still assume that they know how that job should be done. Right? And so even if you're one of those folks that has done that exact job, you're not in that person's shoes. You're not that person in this job on this day doing that thing, right? It's accepting that our work worlds are complicated and complex, right? We deal with all kinds of those folks doing that job. It's never the same. Similar as it may appear on the surface, it's never the same, right? They're adapting and working through all these pressures with internal and external and all this other kind of crap that we throw at them from an organizational standpoint that complicates things or sometimes makes things much harder. And so getting close to it and listening and learning from those that actually get stuff done, they'll tell you where it's harder than it should be. When you build up enough of that trust, they're going to be like, yeah, I almost died there. I almost died doing that like a month ago, which will scare us initially, but that's the stuff that you want, right? That's how you actually get kind of in the direction that we want to go.
And you can just ask somebody, what's the crappiest part of your job? I don't care if it's safety or if it's quality or if it's the most strenuous or if it's just there's 15 steps involved in. I hate that. Tell me the crappiest part of your job and they'll tell you.
That's one of my favorite questions.
And I love what you said, go from the sharp end to the blunt end, because I used to tell people, you start, usually how it works in your career, right, is you start by managing tasks within a process. That you're a worker, you're the sharp end, right? It's very pointed, very specific. Then you usually go to managing people who work in processes. So you're still kind of close to it, but you're kind of standing off to the side. And then you go to managing resources that people need to manage people and processes that those people need to perform tasks in a process. So you're no longer even managing people once you get to a certain level. You're just managing resources, know? And you're right. And if you're talking about the course of 7 to 10 years of getting to that level, how much changes in 7 to 10 years in the average organization, Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
Right. The answer is everything's changed. It's completely different.
And if it hasn't, then you probably work in the government.
Right. Yeah. It's yeah.
That was, I'm sorry. I apologize to any government workers watching this or listening to this. You know what I mean, though.
Well, that's the point, right? Is the work world is never static.
Right.
Right. We're and we fool ourselves a lot of times into thinking that it is. Right. Even in our processes, right? Even in some of our most robust controls that we have around safety stuff, we like to think that like we put it there and it's immovable. Everything's static. But our systems in particular are always degrading, right? Everything's always falling around kind of around us. And it's this constant pursuit of us trying to like continue to like keep these degrading processes and systems and everything else. I mean, you can think physical system in a plant, in a building somewhere. As soon as you commission it, it starts getting worse, right? It's going to continue to get worse over time. And so it's that, right? It's this idea that we're trying to get to a position when we're talking about like listening to folks, when we're talking about and sometimes literally listening to them, like you were talking about that question. One of my favorite questions to ask people is, what's the dumbest thing we make you do here as part of your job to work here? What's the dumbest thing you have to do as part of being an employee here?
That's a good question.
And they will throw you some stuff, man. And it's a lot of the stuff they throw you, you're going to be like, holy crap, we make you do that? Right?
And you know what though, Sam? A lot of people, because there's a fundamental lack of trust,
right?
Which one of my favorite books, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, the first foundational element you have to have in place before anything else is trust, right?
Right.
Trust unlocks so many things, but a lack of trust, traditional organization, you know what most managers, leaders would say to an answer when a worker responds to that question is, oh, well, then you probably don't understand why we have to do that.
Yeah, you just don't get it.
And then they go into justifying, like, well, you have to do this because, and it's like, wait a minute, trust, what you're saying is, can we ask ourselves, is there another way to get to the same end?
Exactly.
Without exposing us to any additional risk, or what will it solve? Do we have to do it that way? I've had people say, well, that's just how, that's how we do it. There's no other way. It would take too much time and effort. I'm like, but would it though? I mean,
would it really?
If we don't challenge ourselves, even with the hard stuff, I mean, we're not even fixing easy stuff, But I agree. I think we need to challenge ourselves more vocally and commit ourselves to really rethinking how we conduct business or make what we make.
Well, it's to me, it's this, and I share this with so many folks, spending time with them, that it's like, when you ask that question, and where it kind of comes back to me is this, is it's everything should be on the table. Anything that cannot undergo thorough examination shouldn't be there. If it can't undergo a little bit of challenge, that should be your first sign, right? That is like, well, we just kind of poked it a little bit and it crumbled. All of our thoughts around it and kind of logic behind it crumbled. Well, that's probably not good, right? This idea that we should be willing to drag all of that stuff out on the table, to have an open and honest conversation about it, and be able to say, well, this isn't working well for the folks that it's actually supposed to be working for, right? And that's where I've always kind of went down this path of more tools, less rules. And this idea of that tools that we provide employees should actually be helpful.
It should work. Yes.
They should work. Like even a procedure, right? If we're talking about a procedure should be a document that helps you to accomplish work. It should aid you in accomplishing work.
I'm going to give you one. I'm going to lay one on you. It's my pet peeve because I've seen it lately. The red tag system in a manufacturing plant or something.
Yeah.
It's like somebody was using a defective tool or defective, whatever. And they have a red tag system in place. And there was something fell out of a bin or something fell off, or I don't know, off of a cart or a shelf, and it got an injury, and it was damaged. Yeah. Well, didn't you check that? Well, no. Well, if you'd have checked it, you would have found it to be damaged. So you didn't inspect it. And then and then some will say, well, it's been like that for a while, but it's never caused us any problems. Well, why didn't you use the red tag process? And it's like, they write it up, recoach this person.
Yeah.
Try to fix them. They're the problem. They didn't follow the red tag process. They didn't follow the inspection process. And it's like, well, I inspected at the beginning of the shift, and at some time during the shift, something happened to it. And it's like, you want me to stop every time I like to do an audit and to check, do I document that or should I just look at it? And if I notice it, I should stop, because I had this line backing up and I'm trying to keep up with flow because
Right.
you had somebody out over there. So you diverted 2 lines to me and you want me to stop and get a red tag. The red tags are in the supervisor's office. And yesterday when I went to get one, they were out. So I had to go to the other supervisor. How easy is that for me
Yeah.
to follow? And then you write the person up for not following the red tag process or something. That's an example, but
No,
you see the frustration, Sam?
I do. And that's where I think that it's, if you really, so what we're asking them to do is to 100% comply, because we believe that through that compliance of always and every time inspecting whatever, right? Always and every time using that red tag, always. And if you were just more careful. And so there's a couple things I think to unpack here, is that those beliefs, like I like to challenge those beliefs really heavily, because when we're saying that you should have paid more attention, and if you paid more attention, this wouldn't have happened to you. What we're really getting to, the really nasty part of that, is what we're saying is that bad things happen to bad people. And if you were a better person, this bad thing would have happened to you.
Hallelujah. Amen.
Right? Which is horrific, right? And
It is terrible.
when you throw that out there to a leader that's saying that, when you boil it down to those terms, they're going to go, oh my goodness, that's really not what I want to be saying, because that makes you sound like an awful human being, right? And if you kind of believe that, I don't know where else to go with that. That's tough. That's a tough one, right? But on the other side of that is that if we believe that if we really believe that if they complied and that they just followed it 100% of the time, then nothing bad would happen, you would get the outcome that you don't want. No, you would still have the risk. And what I mean by that is you'd still have the risk of bad things happening. That doesn't really go anywhere. You're not really minimizing it at all, but something else wouldn't happen. Work would completely stop. Completely. It's that malicious compliance thing.
Yeah.
Right? That if they truly complied with everything that you're telling them to comply with around that,
they'd be stopping all the time.
The work would not happen.
Right.
I mean, that's used in a form of protest sometimes in highly regulated industries. That if I truly comply, okay, you tell me to comply, I will.
Why not get a better rack? Why not increase the PM schedule on our conveyors, right, or our bins or our carts? Like, it's, you said give them better tools. In this case, we're talking about physical, actual tools, but we give them crappy tools and we try to make them police that. Yeah. At the same time, focus on their task. And what we know about through our distracted driving research and training, you can't do 2 things at the same time. That's a myth. Multitasking is a myth. 2 thinking tasks at once is impossible.
Well, and
it's impossible for them.
You don't get to choose when you lose your situational awareness, right? You don't get to choose. You don't get to choose those things when you err. You don't get to choose that, right? That's not a choice. So this idea that we can get people to be more aware, right? More aware of what they're doing, when we can, that they will not, that with enough pressure or with enough force that they're going to choose to stay more aware to their tasks or their surroundings, is just fallacy. That's just not true, right? It just doesn't work that way. That's just not us. I mean, and it's the old, like, we're safety folks, so we got to talk about driving, right? So we're got to throw out the driving example. You already hit it before I got to it, but we got to talk about driving. Right?
I opened the door.
but it's that, right? It's the when you're driving home from work, did you choose to not remember that you just drove through 3 red lights? Because you can't recall the past 5 minutes of your drive. Did you choose that? Because I'm certain that you didn't. Right? The last time that you were in a little bit of a fender bender, you chose to do that exactly? Probably not, right? Probably not. And if we knew those outcomes, that they were going to be negative, we would have probably made different choices, but we don't know the outcomes. We don't know what's going to happen in our world.
But that's hindsight bias, right?
Hindsight bias, right? Exactly.
We have the benefit of knowing that it did happen.
Right.
So we look back and go, you should have.
And we're back to easy.
Yes.
we find ourselves back at the easy button. And almost back to dominoes, right? Like, if we just pulled out that one, then see, nothing bad would happen. It's that easy, super easy. So that one is sometimes you, and more often not, from an organizational standpoint, it's probably you. But I really liked where you're going with this idea, not to kind of veer back off of that,
No, go ahead.
but I'm all over the map, man. You know this. Um,
Me too.
I really like this thought, and it's back to kind of hop fundamental pieces of learning teams.
Yeah.
And we're talking about better tools. We're talking about process that's not functioning the way that's giving us operational surprises, right? It's giving us unintended operational results. And let's just call it that. That's really what accidents are. They're unintended operational outcomes, right? Let's figure out how we can impact that in the most positive way. And the way that you do that is by actually spending time, back to our point on listening. And a learning team is a little bit more of a formalized setting where you can do that, right? Where you can get some of those folks that are actually doing that work with the red tags, with the equipment, with all the stuff. Let's get them together and let's have a conversation about how we can make it not suck. Like, what's the problem, right? Let's just sit down and in a very informal way, let's let them help us figure it out because they're the ones that have to live with it. They suffer with it way more than we do, right? We're kind of like, oh, that outcome. Oh man, they're out there humping it every day, dealing
Every
with
day.
it and just suffering through, struggling, making do, adapting. And side note, usually getting it right, like 99% of the time, getting it totally right. Let's ask them. They know the tricks already. They know what would work better. Let's let them figure out that problem because they're the ones that actually do the work. And the stuff that they're going to come up with will blow our minds. It often does, right? It's like, man, I never would have thought that that would fix that problem, but it totally does, right?
And so I think we've definitely opened up the door, and I definitely want to explore this more because it's a lot deeper than what we could cover in one episode. And I would encourage everybody that's watching or listening to check out the Hop Nerd because this is an ongoing process. You can't just say, like, I love your elevator pitch, but that's just the hook, right? That's just to kind of get people frame their mind, around this, to frame the conversation.
Exactly.
And then you got to go into all the things that we need to do as an organization and individually every day to facilitate this. You can't just go to a class and then you've got this, because that's what we're actually doing to our workers. If you think about it,
Right.
That's called onboarding, I believe. You make them do it one time and then they're supposed to remember it for the next 3 years.
Yeah,
like nothing about their job has changed from the time they went to onboarding to now. So this is something that we need to challenge ourselves as safety pros to constantly engage with operations managers to get closer to the work and to build trust and to listen to those workers. And certainly my big passion is anybody that follows me knows is deep dives, right? Root cause analysis, whatever you want to call it. And that is like, we have got to not wait for something to happen. Like, there is no reason why you can't just pick a process that, like you said, ask people, what's the biggest pain in the butt that you have? What's the stupidest thing we make you do? And if they say, the red tag process, or they say this, or they get a learning team together, go see how can we simplify that? How can we make that better? Why wait for a negative outcome? Right.
And I know we're kind of getting towards the end here, but a couple things there. There's a little bit to unpack that I got to get to. Is that you're right? This kind of shift around our views of people, like that's kind of the more grandiose, kind of on the surface level thing. But all this stuff that we're going to talk about in human organizational performance, like you said, that goes so much deeper. What we're really talking about is digging into a dramatic shift in our organizational assumptions around those things, right? And that's kind of back to more of the HOP principles that, again, I'm not going to run through the HOP principles. Folks can Google those. Todd Conklin has a great book on it if you want to go out there and check it out. An excellent thing. But it's this view of of shifts around those particular things, that understanding that error is super duper normal, so normal that it's boring, right? That's just that learning is vital to where we want to go, that blame fixes nothing, that context drives our behavior, that our reactions matter, right? It's diving into a shift in those assumptions that leads to all of those kind of other organizational approaches that we kind of see. That's the shift. And it's the admission that it is complex, that it's super duper complicated, and it is hard, right? That's the thing that's maybe a little different than what we've seen with maybe other more programmatic traditional approaches to safety, because HOP's not a program. I need to throw that out there. Definitely not something you can just copy and paste
It's like
into your
lean.
organization.
It's not
Right.
a program. It is a way of going about life
It's a change in our belief
in
system.
an organization. Yeah.
Right. It's a complete change in our belief system. So I think that folks that are super, or at least that haven't been exposed to, I think most have. Maybe I'm hoping that people are starting to get exposed to it because, like you say, it's not new. It's kind of getting a little, it's just getting a few decades old, man. This thing's getting some age on it. It's finally growing
It's
some
going to be
legs.
safety 4 by the time they catch up to it, right?
Well, and to that point, it doesn't matter what we call it. It's this idea of caring, or taking better care of those that we're supposed to care for, right? Our views around the human element of our work. And to me, like I said at the beginning, it really gets me back to the core. That's what kept me in this profession, is what the profession is supposed to be about, right? It's supposed to be about people. And that's it, man. That's where it takes me.
If you take people completely out of the process, out of the equation, I don't have a need to be at the company.
Right, same. I wouldn't desire to be here. Like,
Right.
it would be super boring. And I'm if you can't tell, I like to talk. I'm a little bit of a people person. I like spending time with people, getting to know people. And I couldn't
You and me
imagine
both, Sam.
spending time staring at the wall, man. That would be kind of rough.
That would be terrible. Oh, you know what? I had a great joke the other day on a call. I forgot. Imagine that. I forgot to take myself off mute. Famous Zoom mistake. But I started talking. They were like, "Oh, you're still on mute." And my first comment when I came back is, "Don't tell me that. That's a podcaster's worst nightmare, to be talking and nobody's there to listen." So.
No. And I'm sure you've lived through this. I've lived through that too. I've lived through this as well. Anybody that's podcasted has lived through this. Your podcaster's worst nightmare is to get to the end of the episode and realize that you forgot to hit record.
You forgot to hit record.
That's the worst. That's when I wake up like cold sweats in the middle of the night.
You go get up and check your record button. Yeah. Oh man, Sam, look, it's been a pleasure. I want to do another one. We'll get a little more specific to give some of our listeners some actionable, something they can do. I'll have links to your books. You've had how many books now? And well, first of all,
I've got a few.
You've written books. You've written safety books, but then you've written something else, haven't you? Or is it just safety?
So they're mostly around the safety space. So okay. I write. Writing is like my medium for expression. That's just kind of what I do. So I write. I've written a couple books in like the fiction space too, and some other things.
That's what I meant. Okay.
Yeah, but most of my books, and so if you pick up my books, they're not HOP books, which is oddly enough. Most of my books are honed in on the profession itself. Yes. So I wrote a book called Safety Sucks, the Manifesto, which dives a little bit more into some of the principles that we're kind of talking about from the practitioner standpoint, still kind of diving more into a lot of the things that we just touched on, some of the beliefs around those things, but it is still not really a HOP book. If you want HOP books, I would encourage you to go pick up Todd's stuff. If you want Safety Differently books, you need to go pick up Decker's books.
Decker.
I'm not the HOP author here. Those guys do a phenomenal job of putting those concepts into digestible books, right? Go check that out. But the books that I write are around our profession. You know, the first book that I wrote that kind of became a little infamous was Safety Sucks, right? Safety Sucks. And it was a little bit of it was about my experiences, stories of my experience, and the story of how I found myself almost leaving the profession, and kind of all those little different bits. And then from there, the more recent one that I just pushed out was the care and feeding of safety practitioners, which again, diving into
it's
mostly
like,
from our
make them sound like chia pets,
right? Yeah, exactly. But it was diving into more of our perspective. It's a shared view. It really touches on how organizations can better retain their talented and amazing, diverse groups of safety practitioners, because I think many organizations struggle with that because they don't know how to care for safety practitioners because we're weird and wacky and different. Right. We kind of sort of
some of us are nerds. Some of us are geeks. Right.
And some of that is kind of back to what we're talking about at the beginning, is some of the views held about safety practitioners and the role itself, what that role should be, right? What that role can do and can't and should and shouldn't, and what's doable, right? What's doable. I don't think we have a clear, many practitioners struggle with developing that relationship with their employer and defining that role together, right? Around what's the most impactful use of my time, that conversation. And then from our perspective, things that we can do, right, to better care for ourselves. Like we're in this high stress, demanding job. We travel a bunch. We're all over the place. We see a lot of gnarly stuff sometimes too. And how can we better care for ourselves? So I'm not a believe it or not, as much as I talk, I do a much better job of bringing my books into a more
Focus.
clear and concise focus points than I do with my
Yeah,
conversations.
I'm challenging myself more to write more. So I am working on my first book, but
Awesome. Now I'm excited. I'm
no,
excited. I'm excited now.
no, it's terrible. No, it's around what, they say, start with what you're passionate about and what you know.
Mhm.
So it's all about this quote unquote safety culture.
Uh,
It's all just culture, but
right.
so that's my first
Now I'm super
dive
interested,
into the
man.
literary my literary profession. But so I may reach out for some
Yeah.
tips on your
Oh,
process.
I'm not
Because
great at it, but I can.
but I can riff like nobody's
Yeah.
business. I'm like, I've got the gift of gab, and I've been told this, so I'm just repeating what others. I don't know if I do or not, but like to your point, I love this medium. I love the spoken word. I love
Right.
talking. That's why I was so good at my job as a consultant and doing all those keynotes and all that kind of stuff. I just love it. And everybody I come across that is passionate about safety. So I think that's sort of almost like a hidden superpower we have, is that if in the right organization, you give us a stage, we're going to change the world, right?
Right.
We're going to, or we think we are.
Well, it's
And it's
something
exciting.
that
That's why I love talking to safety pros.
Well, I agree with you, because that's something that a lot of myself included, when I first started in this profession, I didn't think I was good at talking at all. Right. And then you have to, it's a skill just like any other thing that, but for me, it's when you find the thing that you're passionate about, it's amazing how quickly your voice comes right behind it. Right. You find your voice. When you find passion, your voice is there. Right. You're up there. You can do it. And so I agree. I think that's such
I've
an
come
amazing thing in those
across
conversations.
in my career safety professionals that were like, holy crap, don't let this person talk to any of your workers. Like, how did they get this job? Like, it's like finding an HR person that hates people. It's like,
Oh, there's some, trust me.
I know. And it's shocking where it's like, wait a minute, human is the human resource. It's people are in the title.
That's where you have more of the how did Decker put it in one of his books, the human remains department instead of the human resources department.
Oh man. So hey, look, Sam, I'm going to have links to your books. I'll have links to your website for the podcast as well. So all of you folks, go check out the Hop Nerd podcast. Some really good stuff there. You talk to some serious folks.
So
there.
we've had, so I go through, so folks that want to go back and listen through, we're at about 250-ish kind of episodes right now. We've got a bunch of episodes on there, and I go through phases where I do interviews. I go through phases where I go on to my own personal little thought explorations, and it's not scripted. It's real deal, just like this. It's real deal conversation. If you're getting my thoughts on the podcast, you're getting them straight out of my mouth, not scripted, not pre-thought out. So
I love it.
and
I love it.
and
I've done that too. And right now I'm in that interview kind of phase. I hated interviews just because of the logistics. Right. It was like, and so I think, what was it, a couple days ago? I was like, hey, Sam, you want to jump on a call?
Let's do an interview.
Yeah. And it was it. I think we wireframed, like we were like, yeah, let's just like H&OP 101 or whatever, and see where it goes. So I'm with you. I don't like the scripted. And I think this is how people have conversations anyway. Right. Well, colleagues,
exactly.
Have conversations like this.
What I appreciated about it, and kind of back to kind of some of the Hop Nerd podcasts, if people go back and listen, and you'll see, like I had Sydney Decker on, I've had Todd Conklin on a couple times, I had Dr. Tim Ludwig, I've had all these kind of mainstream kind of thought leaders from this world kind of there. And that's even kind of the thought with why I ran with a name, is I'm constantly learning, right? Constantly wanting to pick these folks' brains and nerd out on this stuff and really have meaningful conversations about it. And to that point that you just made, is that none of those are scripted. There was no predetermined questions. There were no topics even. I'm just like, let's talk. Right. And so, and credit to them, they're like, for sure.
Yeah.
So what's
I love
great
it.
if you go back and listen through those particular episodes, the wisdom, the know-how that you get from a Sidney Decker, that you get from Todd Conklin, just the little nuggets that set your mind on fire, and then you go that much deeper into what you're trying to learn about. It's just great. It's a great repository of information that
Oh, they're like Easter eggs. Every time I have a conversation with somebody, there's something that gets dropped that I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
I write down, and I would have never done that if we would have had a rigid script of I'm going to ask this and you're going to say that, and
That's
then I'm
what
going
I
to
share
move to
with people
this.
all the time. Is that this is by far the best professional development that I've ever participated in. It's just having a podcast where I get to talk to amazing safety practitioners, hot folks, and from all over the globe. Because you
I
walk
agree,
away
Sam.
with
Hey, we should do
something
this
powerful.
again real soon. We'll get even deeper into another lane, and you can rock out on another Metallica shirt. I love it.
I'll do it, man. Look at that. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, man. Thanks a lot for being on.
For sure.
All right, there you have it, my discussion with Sam. We had a good time. Go ahead and check out Sam's links in the show notes and head on over to the Safety Pro podcast community. You can catch the entire video interview with Sam and think about joining the community and becoming a member. We're doing some really good stuff over there. And I will talk to you on the next Safety Pro podcast.